The 2026 law school rankings just dropped and the headlines are dramatic. Yale lost the number one spot for the first time in 36 years. Stanford is the new number one. Berkeley and Georgetown got kicked out of the T14 and everybody's acting like the legal profession just got rearranged. But it didn't. And I'm going to show you exactly why and more importantly, what you should actually care about instead. My name is Steve Schwartz. I've been doing LSAT prep and law school admissions for over 20 years. I've worked with thousands of students through this process. I've seen how school choice actually plays out, not in the rankings, but in real careers, real debt loads, and real outcomes 10 years down the road. And so when a list like this drops, I look at it differently than most people covering it. Now, here is what US News is calling the T14 this year, except there is no 14th ranked school. It jumps from a three-way tie at 13 straight to 16. So the T14 technically contains 15 schools in the top 13. And if that sounds ridiculous, it's because it is ridiculous. Stanford is number one, Chicago and Yale are tied at number two, Penn and UVA are tied at 4, Harvard is at 6, Duke and NYU tied at 7, Columbia, Northwestern, and Michigan in a three-way tie at 9, Vanderbilt at 12, and Cornell, UCLA, and WashU tied at 13. Berkeley dropped to 16, tied with UT Austin. Georgetown fell to 18, tied with UNC. Both are out of the T14 for the first time in decades. Further down, you've got Texas A&M ranked 22, ahead of USC at 26. Boston College jumped 5 spots into the top 20. Alabama went up 10, Utah dropped 13, Louisville dropped 22 spots, but that's after dropping 42 spots 2 years ago and another 10 spots last year. Now, that school didn't transform 3 times in 3 years, the formula did. Now, when I started teaching the LSAT in 2005, everybody talked about the T14 as if it were carved in stone. The whole point was that those 14 schools never change. But 20 years later, we've got 17 schools in the T14 one year and 15 schools in the T13 the next. The concept is clearly meaningless, so I think it's time we all start treating it that way. Now, US News publishes the formula, and on the surface, it might look reasonable. Employment is 33%. Bar passage is 25%. Peer and professional assessments are another 25%. LSAT and GPA are 9%. And then there's some stuff about faculty ratios and library staffing. Now, most people look at that 9% for LSAT and GPA and think, okay, so test scores are a small piece of the puzzle. And schools love pointing to that number. It reinforces the story of holistic admissions. But that 9% is a lie of omission. Now, here is what's actually happening. Bar passage is 25% of the ranking. What predicts bar passage? LSAT and GPA. Higher entering credentials lead to higher bar passage rates. That's not a theory, that is data across decades. Now, employment is 33%. Students with higher LSATs tend to get higher 1L grades, which leads to better job offers. Big law firms literally ask for your LSAT score during on-campus interviews, so your LSAT follows you around. Now, peer assessments are 12.5%. Now, the law school deans filling out these surveys often don't know much about peer schools beyond their numbers. So what do they look at? The school's median LSAT. A 173 median looks more prestigious than a 165 median. So the assessment is circular. It's measuring the same thing it pretends to be independent of. Now, with lawyer and judge assessments, same dynamic. If a judge has no personal experience with a school, they go by the numbers, and the numbers are LSAT and GPA. So add all that up, roughly 92% of a school's ranking is directly or indirectly driven by LSAT and GPA. Now, I'm going to come back to why that matters enormously for you as a pre-law student. At the very top of the rankings, the formula produces absurd results because elite schools have nearly identical metrics. Yale's employment rate went from 95.5% to 94.9%. That is 0.6 of a point. That's why they lost a 36-year streak at number one. Of course, nothing actually changed at Yale Law School. A few graduates in one class made slightly different career choices, and the formula treats it like a major shift. Now, Berkeley's dean said it directly. The ranking change reflects shifts in the formula, not any meaningful change at this school. The employment metric also treats all full-time legal jobs equally. A public defender making $55,000 counts the same as a first year at Wachtell making $350,000. That's why USC, with 57% big law placement, is ranked 26, while schools with far lower big law rates rank above them. And then there is the compression problem. US News normalizes 198 schools onto a 0 to 100 scale, then rounds to whole numbers. When they added Puerto Rican law schools a couple of years ago, which are schools that tend to score very low, it squeezed the entire top of the scale. Nearly 200 law schools in about 70 usable scoring slots. So ties become inevitable. Nebraska, Wayne State, and Richmond all moved up exactly 9 spots this year. All 3 were tied at 71. Now, all 3 are tied at 62. Now, how do 3 completely unrelated schools in completely different markets improve by the exact same amount? Of course they didn't. The formula just shuffled them into the same bucket. Now, US News could fix this with decimal points, but ties create controversy. Controversy creates traffic, and US News is, of course, in the traffic business as a media organization. Now, here is something that should bother you. US News asks schools to certify the data used in the rankings. If you certify, your faculty get to participate in the peer assessment survey, which accounts for 12.5% of the total ranking. If you don't, you're shut out. Now this year, only 4 of the top 18 schools certified: Chicago, Vanderbilt, WashU, and UT Austin. Stanford didn't, Yale didn't, Harvard, Penn, Virginia, Duke, NYU, Columbia, Berkeley, Georgetown, none of them did it. And so a full 1/8 of the ranking is being shaped without input from faculty at most of the best law schools in the country. And the 4 schools that did participate, all of them did well. Vanderbilt jumped to 12. WashU tied at 13. You can draw your own conclusions here. Now, you've got to understand that law schools are active players in this game. They are not passive recipients of the rankings. Vanderbilt keeps total enrollment across all 3 years at around 500 students. When applications recently surged, they actually reduced their class size to protect per-student outcomes. Of course, they're smart and student-centered, but it's also a direct rankings play. Smaller class, higher placement percentage, rankings go up. Now, Georgetown does the opposite. They've got a huge class, tons of transfer students from lower-ranked schools, and so their top-of-class outcomes are exceptional. Some of the biggest names in American law came out of Georgetown. But size inflates the denominator and the math punishes them. That's why Georgetown is at 18 and Vanderbilt's at 12, because of simple arithmetic. Now, the same dynamic plays out everywhere. When you see a school's ranking jump or drop, your first question should never be, what changed at that school? It should be, what changed in the formula, and how is that school managing its inputs? Now, I've been working in this industry for over 20 years now, and I can tell you from hundreds of conversations with attorneys, admissions officers, and career services professionals, the people making hiring decisions at law firms do not consult US News rankings. They don't track year-to-year changes. Most of them couldn't tell you what number their own school is ranked at right now. Now, there is a stable hierarchy in the minds of the people who hire lawyers. It looks roughly like this: Yale at the top, alone in a class of its own. Then you've got Stanford, Harvard, Chicago, then Columbia, NYU, Penn, then UVA and Duke, then Berkeley and Michigan and Northwestern, then Cornell, then Georgetown. That hierarchy has been essentially unchanged for decades. One hiring committee member said Columbia at number 9 is laughably out of touch with how any firm in the country views that school. An associate said the traditional hierarchy is the traditional hierarchy, period. And here's something people don't think about. Rankings change while you're in school. They change during 1L, then 2L, then 3L. By the time you've been practicing for 2 years, 5 years of rankings changes have occurred since you enrolled. So if you chose your school based on a single year's ranking, you were chasing a number that's already outdated before you sat for your first exam. So the question becomes, what should you actually look at? Start with big law plus federal clerkship placement, but you've got to understand it correctly. For the most recent graduating class, Cornell placed 72% into big law. Berkeley placed about 61% into big law or federal clerkships. Georgetown about 59%, USC 57%, UCLA 56%, UT Austin about 54%. WashU at 48%. Now look at where US News put them. WashU at 48% is ranked 13. USC at 57% is ranked 26. That is totally backwards. It is completely wrong. Of course, you got to consider context. Yale's big law percentage is lower than Cornell's, not because Yale is worse for big law, but because Yale students disproportionately choose clerkships, academia, and public interest. Yale could place almost everybody into big law, but their students don't want that. Of course, Berkeley students self-select into the Bay Area. Michigan students choose the Midwest. So a school where 50% go to big law because 50% want big law is a completely different animal than a school where 50% go only because 50% can. So you always want to ask, is this number reflecting access or preference? Now, here's a mistake I see constantly. Applicants assume a ranking number means national portability, that a degree from a school ranked 22 works equally well in any market, but of course it does not. Now, a practicing attorney in Chicago described the problem perfectly. His firm gets flooded with applications from the University of Minnesota ranked 22 this year. Students are near the median, they have essentially no chance. His assessment was that the school markets itself as a national big law feeder, but it really is not one. Now, if you want to practice in Minnesota, Minnesota might be the best school you could attend. But if you want big law in New York, Chicago, or DC, that same degree does not travel. And that applies to every school outside the top 13 or so. Every school has a geographic footprint. And so before you enroll, you want to ask career services for placement data broken down by market. And if they won't give it to you, that tells you everything you need to know. And if you're looking at schools ranked below 50, the honest truth is that there is not a meaningful difference between 75 and 125. Both are going to be regional schools. So at that point, your decision should be about cost, location, and bar passage rate, and which school places best in the specific city where you want to practice. Now, of course, while the rankings shifted, the median LSAT scores at these schools didn't really change. Berkeley's median didn't drop because they fell to 16. Georgetown didn't get easier to get into at 18. So you got to target the same schools with the same numbers. But remember that 92% of a school's ranking is driven by LSAT and GPA. That's not a fun fact about methodology, it's how admissions works, how you get scholarships, and how the job opportunities flow. Your LSAT score is the single most controllable variable in this entire process. Your GPA is pretty set at this point, most likely. Your work experience is what it is. Personal statement matters on the margins maybe, but your LSAT score is the lever you can move, and it moves everything else. Getting just 3 points more on the LSAT could be the difference between a rejection and getting accepted, could be the difference between getting sticker price tuition and getting a full ride. At some schools, it's worth over $100,000 over the course of 3 years. And so instead of arguing about whether WashU belongs at 13 or 17, I want you to focus on the thing that will actually change your life, which is your LSAT score. Now, if you've already gotten in and you have deposit deadlines coming up, the rankings could actually work in your favor, because schools that dropped in the rankings know how it affects yield, which is the percentage of admitted students who actually show up. They know some applicants are going to get spooked and go elsewhere, and that makes them more willing to improve their scholarship offers to you if they want to retain you. Now, if you have a competing offer from a peer school, and the school that just dropped has a deadline approaching, this is the time to make a polite professional ask for more money. Now, you don't say your ranking dropped, you say, here's a competing offer, and you let the context do the work. Worst case, they say no. And on the flip side, if a school you just got into just jumped in the rankings, you've lost a little bit of leverage. More students might choose to go to their school, reducing their incentive to compete for you. But of course, deadlines are coming up. If you're going to act, this is the best time to act. Now, if you're studying for the LSAT, you're looking for some support, I'm offering free LSAT tutoring for everybody watching this now or later. The link to book that free tutoring lesson with me is unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below this video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and IG as well. Now, there's something I haven't really seen anybody talking about in all this coverage of the rankings. I thought it's worth bringing up, which is that AI is reshaping the legal profession right now in ways we're only beginning to understand. And the skills that are going to differentiate great lawyers 5 and 10 years from now, including judgment, client relationships, creative problem solving, the ability to use these AI tools strategically, those are not measured by any ranking. The bar passage rates don't cover them. Big law placement doesn't cover that either. And so mid-level legal work like doc review and drafting contracts, it's going to be increasingly handled by AI. And so the lawyers who succeed are going to be the ones who can do what AI cannot do, which is building trust, human relationships, and thinking creatively. And so no ranking is going to measure that. US News has not taken that into account. And so the schools that will actually best prepare you for the future might not be the ones sitting at the top of this US News ranking, which includes library staffing and peer opinion surveys. So when you're choosing a law school, you want to ask yourself, is this school preparing me for the profession as it exists today or as it will exist in 2030? Because the rankings definitely are not covering that. Now, if you do want to look at some rankings, US News is not the best source. There are some better sources out there. One I would recommend is the Above the Law rankings. They weight entirely on outcomes like employment, salary, and debt. There's no opinion surveys, no librarians. If you care about ROI, Above the Law is a better tool. I would also look at law school data, which tracks what applicants actually do when admitted to multiple schools. And so, for example, if someone gets into both the Georgetown and Cornell, which one do they pick? And so if you aggregate thousands of those decisions, you get a ranking based on revealed preferences. And of course, that's not perfect, but it's useful. And of course, the ABA employment data. Every school reports detailed outcomes to the ABA, including big law, clerkships, unemployment, jobs that don't even require a law degree. All of that is public and it's the raw data. US News distorts with their formula. And so rather than using the formula, you can go right to the source. Now, when looking at schools, I would look at big law and federal clerkship rate over 3 years, not just one single year, because that could be an outlier. 3 years average is a more better indicator of what you should actually do. You also want to look at class size. Then second, you want to look at debt at graduation. Tuition plus living expenses minus your scholarship times 3 for 3 years of law school. A full ride at a school ranked 20th beats taking on $250,000 in debt at a school ranked 8th for the vast majority of people. Debt will dictate the first decade of your career, what kind of jobs you can take on, if you can take on a clerkship or public interest, or otherwise have to go to big law. You also want to look at geographic placement. Where do graduates actually end up? If 80% stay in one region and that's not your region, that matters more than any ranking. You also want to look at bar passage rates, especially outside the top 20 schools. 97% versus 85% is significant. Also look at specialty strength. If you know your area where you want to practice, find out which schools have the clinics, the faculty, and the pipelines in that space. Berkeley, of course, is great for tech law and environmental law. NYU is great for tax and international law. Georgetown and UVA are great for DC litigation. And so consider that when you're deciding where to go. And if you can visit, definitely go there in person. Don't only go to the admitted students events because those are, of course, polished. They're marketing events. Find random students on campus and talk to them. Ask what they wish the school did and what the school has, what the career services is like. Get an honest conversation that is not filtered by admissions. Now you want to ask, does this school at this price give you a realistic path to the career that you actually want? Not the career a ranking implies, not the career your parents want, the career that you want. Now, if you are a current law student and your school just dropped in the rankings, relax. Nothing changed between yesterday and today. It's the same professors, the same courses, same firms recruiting on campus, the same alumni network. Your degree will say the same thing on it on the day you graduate, regardless of the ranking. And employers hiring you in a couple of years aren't going to remember or care what US News said in April of 2026. They're going to keep out your grades, your writing sample, your interview, and whether they want to work with you. Now, the hiring partner reviewing your resume is not looking at this year's rankings to decide whether your school is good enough. They already know whether it's good enough. Again, don't agonize over the rankings. Frankly, I think the rankings are stupid, and the rankings from a magazine are beyond stupid. The legal profession, like the rest of society, is reckoning with the end of the boomer era. Rankings are peak boomer, a relic of a world where prestige was gated, information was scarce, and a single list could define your entire future. But that world is now gone. Your future is defined by what you do, not by what a magazine says you should want or where you should go. Now, again, if you'd like my help, I'm offering free LSAT tutoring for everybody watching this now or later. The link to book that free tutoring with me is unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below this video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and IG as well. That is an open offer. I do daily live streams every single weekday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific. If you find these helpful, please spread the word. The only way this grows is through word of mouth. I don't do any advertising for these lives. The algorithm doesn't really boost them because they can't run any ads during them, so I do appreciate your support. In the meantime, all the best. Take care.